Holla ballers, what's going on? It's Preacher! And we're looking at the Demonology Warlock for Legion. Big follow-up after we started talking about more specific stuff recently is that the Demonology Warlock is obviously going to be gutted. And many of us are kind of curious as to how this is going to go. Demonology should be the coolest spec in the game, at least visually. Why? Because we turn into a fucking demon. We're going into Legion. It's demon-filled. It should be all good for the Demonology Warlock. But Blizzard didn't see it that way. Now, I will agree with one thing. Demonology isn't that pick-up-and-play friendly. It isn't. In comparison to nearly every other spec in the game, it just is not. But you can clearly see that by my play in the background, because I haven't played it since 6.1 when it got killed. Is that if you did get comfortable with it, which you can do, it doesn't take much to do that. Once you get comfortable with how it works, it's so good. And you might recall my initial guide to WoD, where we pulled off some of the creamiest and crispiest greatness that I've done on any spec in WoD. I had the most fun in WoD, and I can flat out tell you now, I had the most fun in WoD doing more absurd things with the Demonology Warlock, and the rest of the specs just weren't capable of it in most cases, unless you were just overgearing, and that's not fun. You could play the spec in a way that could give you amazing results, and that was fan-fucking-tastic. But Blizzard disagreed. For a number of reasons. Probably because it wasn't that pick-up-and-play friendly. You needed to get comfortable with it in order to really start to see its potential. And they didn't like that. And now we've seen, of course, that a lot of the stuff that the Demonology Warlock traditionally does is being moved over to the Demon Hunter. Does that necessarily mean that Demonology won't maintain some of that? No. It's unlikely, but it probably means that it is not. Now, for me, when talking about the Demonology Warlock, a lot of the ideas that I have about how a Demonology Warlock should be played and the overhaul that might be coming are kind of scuppered by some of the not outright rules that Blizzard sets, but sort of the rules they've set by only following them. Let me explain that in a little bit more detail. So they don't openly say it, but they know pets suck, right? Pets suck, we know it. Hunters were overjoyed to get a lone wolf talent because sometimes just pets suck. You might recall the pet assist video that I made, which opened and changed the world for many pet users, when I was saying, look, this is what's actually going on when you're not paying attention to your screen. Look what your pet does, because more often than not, your pet gets lost into the frenzy of the melee, and you don't quite see exactly what your pet's doing, and if you're not paying attention, your pet, which should be a huge source of damage, is actually derping around and doing all kinds of crazy things. Not excluding, of course, the many bosses, especially in Warlords of Draenor, where pet classes have been just screwed over. Some of the pet abilities, we've had stampedes that just fly through the air on several bosses, and so on and so forth. And Blizzard is very reluctant, because they can't seem to get it correct, which is no doubt immensely more difficult than I could possibly imagine, in getting the pets to be consistently always good, to the point where a spec can rely on their pet all the damn time to get it to work, right? To get it to work correctly, and therefore revolving everything around the pet is a little bit difficult. It's why BM pet does a shitload of damage, but how many BM hunters have played and suddenly your kill command's just not working, and you're like, what the fuck, my pet is clearly there, why is kill command not working? And it just becomes so frustrating when those things happen. And it's only if you play them pretty regularly where you run into these issues. If you just pick it up and play a hunter, you probably won't notice that these pet things can often occur, but they do occur, and they occur more regularly than we would like. So pets suck. So what they decided to do, especially with pet-related classes, is, yeah, your pet does a lot of damage, right? There's no doubt about that. Your pet will do a lot of damage, but we're still going to maintain a lot of that in the control of the player. A lot of stuff is going to stick with the player. It's no doubt going to be a DPS loss if your pet suddenly goes mad derp, but you're still going to be able to play the game, and you're going to be okay, and you're going to be able to sort that issue out. And so they gave instant summons. Demonology has instant summons of its demons, and they gave it to hunters as well, in reviving with the Phoenix, should your pet die or anything like that. They did their best to try and reset your pet. It's essentially what you're doing, resetting your pet, because they rarely die unless they got aggro on something. They rarely die, but the ability to reset your pet, pull it back, and sometimes it just doesn't go anywhere, and you're like, oh my god, come back to me, pet, where are you? Your pet is already active. Where? You must revive your pet. Your pet isn't dead. What the fuck is going on? And it happens. There's a couple of other things that kind of prevent what I think the Demonology Warlock should be doing, that means that it probably won't happen. Another one is multiple action bars are generally frowned upon by Blizzard. Whenever we have something that changes our action bar, it's always extremely limited. So if we look at things like getting into vehicles, be it a Demolisher, if you've done the Flame Leviathan, if it's getting into a dragon in the Oculus or even at Malagos, or if it's Terran Gorefiend where we take control of something, or anything where you take control of something, they always give you very, very few spells. Because even though they're easy, like you take a Ghost at Terran Gorefiend, you have fucking Frost Nova and Ice Lance is essentially all you need in that situation. You have something else you can do to the boss. But people still really struggle with that. They're like, what do I do here? It's like, dude, you have a Frost Nova and a fucking Ice Lance. How can you not get this, right? You basically have 2 buttons that you need to press. And people are like, I can't do it. It's too fucking hard, man. And I can play my class really well. You give me 2 buttons of another spec, I just can't do it. I cannot do it. And so they really frown on giving people the ability to have like a completely separate action bar from what they're ordinarily used to, because players really struggle with that. Whether you like it or not, or whether you're sat there saying, well, that's a shitty reason, it's just a fact. People really struggle with it. I can't even count the amount of times I've had to deal with people as a raid leader when they're asked to do something like, can you just do the Pyrite on fucking Flame Leviathan? All you have to do is throw it and make sure the debuff doesn't fall off. That's it. And they can't do it. They just cannot do it. And Demonology has tried to fix that in Warlords of Draenor. They've tried to fix it by simply keeping the buttons basically the same, but they do something different. So Corruption just turns into Doom. You don't have to learn anything else. You just have to know that there's 2 dots and they're on the same button. Your Shadow Bolt becomes Touch of Chaos. It's really simple. And a lot of the extra cool stuff, like Carrion Wings and all that, got taken away because people just were like, I'm not using it. I can't use it. Or it was getting so underutilized that they were like, yeah, okay, we'll have to do away with that. So Hand of Gul'dan will turn into Chaos Wave, which kind of does the same thing, but one hits harder and one looks fucking way cooler. But yeah, that's the general gist. So, for me, Demonology then, because of those things, shifted away from demons and towards Meta. Meta originally was just a DPS cooldown. You might remember when Meta was super cool. You turned into it and you were basically shooting off soul fires. That was it. It was just a big cooldown that you could reset quicker. Depending on the DPS that you did outside of Metamorphosis, you could just reduce the cooldown of it, which was really cool when you had to do that perfectly. I was a Warlock in Method and we were doing the fucking Deathwing, the Spine of Deathwing, and the trick that I had there was that I had to reset my Meta form for every time the tendon appeared. I had to do that. That was my job outside of that, was not to bother with everything else, but to make sure I could get back into Meta for every single tendon. And that was a cool playstyle. That was interesting. But in order to make Meta more interesting / not push more things towards pets, I believe was the idea in the office, but I'm guessing, obviously, they decided to shift over to the Demonic Fury, and you could control Meta. You can jump in and out at all times, which severely devalues how cool Metamorphosis should be. Metamorphosis should be so fucking badass. It is ridiculous. But you literally see people pop in, drop on a Curse of Doom, pop out and call it a day and wait until everything's perfect. And then they added in spells which are just absurd, like Doom Bolts, which I've never seen anything as boring in my life as you pop into Illidan form, for fuck's sake, and you just cast 4 spells and then you're out again. Then you just kind of derp around playing half a spec until you can go back in and cast your 1 spell. How was that done? So Meta and its current incarnation really sucks. In my opinion, Meta really, really sucks. It's so underwhelming. Touch of Chaos, they didn't even add a graphic to it. It's just like a little cleave thing. It's like, wow, what's going on there? But they've tried and tested lots of things. And so I might sound like I'm bitching, but this is the current incarnation of the Demonology Warlock. Which, again, I want to remind you here, if you've got this far, is that this was the most fun spec I played in WoD, right? I want you to bear that in mind, but it's not without fault, right? And it's going to be overhauled whether we like it or not. I'm not kind of like saying this needs overhauling. It's happening. It's going to happen. And so there's still a lot of things I like about Meta, okay? I like Decimation. Decimation was always cool. We have this cool executability. I would have loved it to have refreshed, if used in Meta form, just saying in WoD, to refresh Corruption so we didn't have to pop out and you could stay in. I don't see why we should have to come out of Meta form in the execute phase. That would be really cool, because if you play your cards right and you're doing AoE, you can stay in Meta form for essentially a fucking shitload of time anyway. I like Imp Swarm, and this is coming off the back of a reduced RNG video. Why? We can glyph it if we want to. This is all I ever talk about. When I was talking about the RNG video, I was talking about having the choice. We can have normal Imp Swarm, or we can have the glyph, and we can choose to have it on when we want it, and we can choose not to have it, although it doesn't have a lot of the interactions that it had in Mr. Pandaria. That's a given. But Imp Swarm, the way it works, the fact that we're constantly pulling in demons from the other realm, is very cool. It's very cool. It's always subject to abuse, not going to lie. It's always subject to abuse, and we know things that happen now and in the past where Imp Swarm is abused. But you can choose to do stuff with it, which is all I ever ask when it's spells that are RNG, is that you can choose to remove the RNG and do it that way. I love Decimation. I think they work really well. It's sad that things like Hellfire and Immolation just aren't as cool anymore. That's a little bit sad. But there's cool ideas there, like Manaros Fury. However, we still have super boring talents like Demonic Servitude, which I don't understand why, again, they devalued something as cool as the Doomguard. Seeing all the Doomguards appear when you have several Warlocks in the raid is a very cool moment. Doubling them up again and then just making it permanent is kind of loses a lot of its flavour, which is always the danger when you have very cool visual things, is that you devalue them by either giving them permanently or allowing them to be casted all the time. Hello, Chaos Bolt, right? You get the idea. If it's there all the time, it's just not that interesting. So for me, the direction I would love Demonology to go, for Legion, is certainly to start inhabiting demons. This makes total sense to me, is that a Demonology Warlock should be able to become a demon. And in order to do that, we can add more demons into the mix. Let's be honest, there's not much extra. There's actually nothing extra that a Demonology Warlock has access to in terms of demons that the others don't. Right? Affliction has the same, and Destruction has the same. What we still have access to, Pit Lords. They're still out there and underutilized. Dreadlords haven't been used, and neither has Demonic Hounds. Unleashing the Demonic Hounds would be amazing, especially if you could ride them in and actually control the Demonic Hound, even if it's only a simple couple of buttons. They want to simplify the spec. Now, hey, look, listen to me, right? I'm not all for super simple specs. I'm not into it, right? I like a middle ground. I don't like overly cumbersome micromanaged specs. I'm not into them. I'm not into overly simple specs either. I like a middle ground. So if we could unleash the Hounds, which literally charges you into battle with Demon Hounds on either side of you, into the melee fracas, and start going crazy with bites and shreds and all that kind of stuff, and obviously it's balanced around the idea that you can do that. So what I'm suggesting here essentially is Soulburn, but meta version, right? The meta version of doing this is that you become Illidan, which is super cool, and then you actually either inhibit or become, although ideally, graphically, I would like you to ride on the back of it, because I just think that's super awesome. Shoot me, but I think that is always super cool, is to become the demon itself. If we can't do that, then we can become the demon. And Demonology form is, I'm on the fence with Demonology form. I wrote down two ideas. Either one, you can have Demonology form as it is now, which greatly enhances your normal spells, because we'll still definitely have something that's the basic, because the basic form, or you can be in it permanently should you choose to, such as Druids can be in Tree of Life form all the time. It doesn't sound that absurd when you look at it that way, that a Demonology Warlock can stay in its enhanced demon form permanently. But the cooldown, Meta, gives you access to turn into a demon, or in fact ride on the back of the demon, depending on the visuals that you prefer, which will be Unleash the Hounds, where you go into the melee and you have the 5 hounds and you ride the middle one and you're kicking ass, turning into a Dreadlord, which is obviously the caster equivalent. I would love to see that, the Dreadlord utilised, and have these extra demons only available for the Demonology Warlocks who have spec'd into it. And of course the Pit Lords, which would be something that can tank temporarily. That would be no problem to me, to be able to turn into a big fat Pit Lord when your tank dies and tank temporarily while things are going on. Or tank temporarily in any other scenario. This is always cool if you get into those scenarios where Blizzard's really against at the moment, is having the idea of random extras that might need like 3 tanks. It's either you have 3 tanks for the entire fight or you have 2, instead of giving people the option to be able to tank temporarily via their class abilities. At the moment, we do have some things like that, so you can do things like Taunt, Die by the Sword, but they're extremely short-lived. Being able to use a Warlock to turn into a Pit Lord temporarily and apply that to other classes, BM Hunters would be obvious, and certain other specs should obviously be able to do this. You can even make your mind up of how that would work, is that they can tank temporarily, and that's a great addition to the arsenal of, one, being able to save a party or a raid, which increases the skill cap if you're very quickly able to do this, or just the fact that you can turn into a demon and do something badass, turning into a giant Dreadlord or dragging the Demonic Hounds in. I basically like the out of meta playstyle. I like Hand of Gul'dan. I think it's cool. It's a little bit probably not intended that you can stack it, although I believe it's intended at this moment. I would expect that to change though. But the other stuff is just so more push the spec towards its demons. Let's not be too afraid. If you have to make the action bars relatively simple, that's no big deal if you offset the fact that it's not super over the top by making it really visually appealing. It works in two sides, right? It always has done. Like Light's Hammer from a Paladin ain't that great. It's basically Consecration plus. But the fact that you throw a hammer in the ground like Thor and it shoots fucking lightning out there doesn't matter that it's not a particularly interesting spell. It looks badass. And no matter what you tell me in a game, if something's not that interesting but it looks cool, people will be fine with it. People will be more than fine with it. If you want to add in extra stuff, by all means, and you guys can suggest that down below. But all I want to see out of Legion is them seriously push to have Demonology do something cool with the underutilized demons that are in there, and please, for the love of God, make the demons interesting. Right now, we have a lot of demons that get lost into the melee, and we don't really care, and we're trying to track them, and we're trying to use move to, and organize our pets in a way that they'll stay where they want to be, and just hope they don't die, and do their job, and then reposition them for things like a Wrathstorm, or whatever it might be. All these kind of things we're trying to get right, but they can't even really be seen most of the time. Right? You can't really see them. Your Felimps, even if you have a lot of them, sometimes it looks cool, but most of the time it's lost because you're either stacked up or doing something. And I think a Demonology Warlock visually should very much be able to stand out from the crowd when it's going hardcore. And I would love to see that you can stand at range, unleash the Demonic Hounds, 5 Demonic Hounds comes charging out, or whatever it might be, even 1 if you want it to be, charges you straight into the melee, does a shitload of damage for a temporary period of time, and then returns you to your original position, or allows you to get back to wherever you want to be, something along those lines, or you can even teleport back. Warlocks have teleport, that exists in the game, and it's no big deal for Warlocks to just port back and have fun doing that. I think that would be cool. That's where I'd like to see it go. What are your ideas? It's going to happen whether you like it or not. So let's hear what you've got to say. Thank you, guys. I'll see you later.